When camels were first brought into Australia to help explore and open up the harsh interior of the continent, it could hardly have been anticipated that they would one day become a menace, causing enormous environmental damage. But as it happens, they've adapted so well to Central Australia that they're now overrunning the desert country, stretching from Western Australia to Queensland. The federal government has recognised the seriousness of the problem by contributing $19 million towards a camel control program. We're now told a massive cull may be the only way to deal with the population explosion that now has far-reaching consequences. Paul Lockyer reports.
The huge dust storm that rolled in from Central Australia recently to shroud Sydney, Brisbane and most of eastern Australia was blamed on drought and a drying lake air. But the view from Central Australia was different. Camels were held responsible through their destruction of desert vegetation, with warnings that there could be many more dust storms to come.
There'll be more of them because there will not be the ground cover. If we allow this to go on, they're going to have phenomenal impact and you'll have more dust storms like you had the other day.
Ever since they were set loose in the 1920s, camels have flourished in Australia. The pickings in the outback are so good that the biggest problem they face is overeating.
Our deserts are just loaded with camel food, yeah. It's just a never-ending supermarket for them and they just walk around and eat and do nothing much else.
Rex Ellis has been working with camels for 40 years. Spring finds him leading a group of artists through the rugged beauty of South Australia's Flinders Ranges. Winter months, he takes his camel tours north, across the Central Australian deserts.
And they actually like to work. These camels live up to 50 years if you work them, whereas in the desert they die of obesity at 25 or 30 years, you know. But when there's so many of them, they're starting to have a disastrous effect on certain plant communities, and that's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Jan Ferguson is part of an Alice Springs research team that has been monitoring the impact of the growing camel population. The findings are alarming.
We can ignore this problem, but we'll do so at our peril because they are a huge animal and they can eat a tree up to such a height. You know, it's like having your own private giraffe farm, quite frankly.
Latest calculations put the camel population at over 1 million and growing by 80,000 a year. The herd has been building up for more than 150 years.
If you look at why camels were brought into Australia in the first place, which was primarily for the Burke and Wills expedition, still the best way to explore the desert is on foot, using pack camels as your support. But of course, camels are all across here. Wherever you see these dunes, all of this desert country.
Latter-day explorer Andrew Harper spends much time with scientific expeditions roaming the arid interior.
Taking camels out there with our ecologists and exploring the desert and discovering things, and there's so much more left to explore out there. It's by no means a closed book.
We travelled over 1,000 miles on that journey and saw many wonderful places.
Filmmaker Charles Chevelle was heavily reliant on camels when he travelled through the outback in the 1950s to make his documentary series Walkabout.
His feet, like masses of sponge rubber, never slip, and in spite of the ungainly leg, he never stumbles unless hurried unduly.
They're just the best animals, they never let you down. The outsider sort of sees them as grumpy and irritable and dangerous and all sorts of things like that, but really they're massive sooks, you know, once you understand that. And we're so puny by comparison that just as well they are massive sooks, you know.
But the camel operators of today realise that measures have to be taken to control the growing numbers in the wild.
So something's got to be done, otherwise they could arguably take over inland Australia, which they're sort of doing in some ways. And
you know, I work with camels all through the winter, you know, and I love working with them and you get very attached to them, but I'm a realist and I can understand there's a problem out there that needs to be dealt with.
They're doing significant environmental and infrastructure damage. We estimate the infrastructure damage to be in the vicinity of $14 million a year.
Few fences are strong enough to keep the camels at bay, and increasingly landholders are reaching for their rights to try to control the animals, but they keep coming. They're to be found where the dust now rises from the drying surface of Lake Eyre. And to the north on Cowrie Station, a vast cattle property covering 4,000 square kilometres, not even a long drought has deterred the camel influx.
3 years ago, we took 2,500 camels off Cowrie in one 12-month period. That is an enormous number of camels, and they certainly create a huge impact. Fences, yards, paddocks, pipelines, troughs and tanks can all be damaged, and that's an enormous cost to the pastoralists to replace that.
The federal government has allocated $19 million to help with the problem. It's being used to plan a camel control program which will reach across the vast desert country of Central Australia, taking in 3 states and the Northern Territory. Many efforts have been made before to try to capitalise on the camel population through the meat trade and even live exports to the Middle East. But out here they don't seem to have made a dent on the numbers.
We certainly would want to be working with people around all of those options, and we've done a huge amount to actually promote the consumption of camel meat. The industry is a worthwhile initiative. It's sound, it's robust, but it will not deal with 1 million camels.
The ambitious objective is to cut numbers by 2/3. That's 650,000 camels. It seems that only a mass cull can achieve that result.
That's going to be difficult, it's going to be expensive, but it might be the only way to go.
But it hasn't gone down well on American television.
There is a serial killer in Australia, and we're going to put his picture up so you can see who it is. That would be the Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd.
No, I like him.
Okay, well, you know what he's doing? He has launched airstrikes against camels in the outback.
That's like genocide, except for Camelcide.
It's
Camelcide.
It is Camelcide.
Comments later explained away as tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, Kevin Rudd.
There's a massive amount of science behind this. I mean, none of us like the whole concept of culling. However, you're really determining what you're culling. You're either getting rid of them or you're getting rid of our biodiversity, flora and fauna, and the things which Australians hold dear.
They include, apparently, the best racing camels in the world.